Hey guys, Dan and Mason here with another short episode of the Big Picture Blueprint YouTube series. And today we're talking a bit about undesirable characteristics and how to weigh them when evaluating land. So this is really top of mind for me because I know that there's some softwares people are using where they're just by default scrubbing out flood zones and wetlands and properties that don't have access. And if you're brand new and you don't know your market yet, this is not a good idea. I have sold a lot of lots in very nice areas that have both flood zones and wetlands. Actually sold one yesterday we'll talk about, and it's all a matter of the supply and demand in that market. So we'll get to it in a moment. But Mason?
Yeah, and I think the most important lesson to take from this is do not overgeneralize any of these specific things we're talking about to each, to all markets in the country. Everything is location dependent. Wetlands in some areas are absolute deal killers. Wetlands in other areas don't mean anything at all. Same with flood zone, same with access, and same with a lot of the what people typically call deal killers or filters that they put on. It's just market specific, which is the main point. So we'll illustrate a few examples here of some that don't mean a lot and some that would absolutely crush you if you executed on the deal.
Yeah, so I know you have an example you want to show, but since it's top of mind, it closed yesterday for me. I sold a lot. A visual wouldn't really add to this, but I sold a lot yesterday in North Carolina. Bought it for 25, sold it for 45. A couple days on market. I think it was a 45 to 50 day hold total, and it's entirely in a flood zone. But so is the whole neighborhood. Every house there is in a flood zone. Everybody knows that, but they want to live there because, unsurprisingly, it's right next to the ocean. It's a nice golf course neighborhood, and so it's just a matter of factoring in the flood insurance. And if you want to be in that neighborhood, you're going to be in a flood zone. So there was no supply in that area of lots that did not have a flood zone, yet there is substantial demand. So it didn't matter. And that is one of the overarching points we want to make here is when you look at a lot, let's say it's covered in a flood zone, maybe it's got some wetlands, look around. Does every single house avoid flood zones and wetlands? Are all the lots that are trading totally high and dry, or are a bunch of houses in the same scenario? That'll quickly answer your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will pull up a visual example right now of a lot that I wish I could provide more details. I don't even remember how much we had it under contract to buy, but this was in Florida, in Seminole County, Florida, and it was this huge corner lot. And I remember seeing it was like a lot up here, something like that, that sold for a bunch of money. And we got it under contract at what was a pretty decent deal. But you can see here's all these newer homes. Here's a beautiful home, like right on the lake right here. But when you filter, which is something that we just do pretty standard, we use regrid when we're doing our basic research. We check out the flood zone. Okay, nice, no flood zone. That's great. Then we check out the wetlands. And you can see that, all right, everywhere there's wetlands, pretty much, there are no homes except this one right here, which looks like a very, very nice luxury home. But there's no homes being built. And we contacted an engineering group to do a wetland delineation study. And we got it back, and it's entirely wetlands. I mean, it doesn't even show up on the map. You saw it on the other one. But the issue with it is that when you could build on this, and if the price of the homes was worth it, you could make it work. But you start paying for these credits that absolutely just destroy any margins. And I've had this happen. I had this happen in Florida. We paid for it. We couldn't make the numbers work. It looks like the land sold since we last contacted them. This was a few years ago, but they're not going to be able to build on it for anything. Like any builder would not be able to make any margins on it. If they're building for a single family residence, that's great. It was actually big enough to build two homes on it. You can kind of see how all these lots are split up like this. But it didn't make sense for our investment thesis. And that right there just totally killed the deal.
Yeah, that's a great example. And so it just comes down to price and supply and demand. So another example of this is in the Carolinas. We do perk tests all the time. And I remember this lot because this is one that we lost. We negotiated with this guy forever and we lost it. And I don't remember which coastal city it was, but it was a really expensive coastal city. It was several acres, but it was just covered in wetlands. It had failed a perk test in the past, and he wanted to sell. And we were newer to the market, and our realtor goes, "Oh, well, someone will still buy that. That's such a desirable area, and to have that big of a parcel, someone will absolutely still buy that. Because at the end of the day, if a property fails a perk test, you can solve for it. You can bring in enough filter. You can talk to a soil environmental consultant and make it work with an engineered septic and some modifying of the land. But it's expensive. And so for all intents and purposes, a lot of places, if a lot fails a perk test, nobody wants it because there's plenty others to build on. But if you have, a hugely desirable area with an oversized lot like the one I'm thinking of, someone will eat that cost and probably pay not the price they would have otherwise, but still pay a margin for that lot if there's enough demand. And so that's really the point. What is the supply and demand? And will someone pay the cost to mitigate the problem with the lot?
And it starts with putting the end in mind at the beginning of this all. And go back and watch our YouTube video that we talk about matching your buyer to your product. You got to think about who your buyer is. Where if your product is something really, really beautiful and there are these issues with it, it's okay. But if it's just going to be something that is so cost prohibitive that whoever the end buyer is, I mean, I had a deal in New York that we looked at that going to be an amazing minor subdivision that, killer deal. Nothing showed up on the federal level, but there was New York State specific wetlands on the property that were protected, that it was going to cost, I think, almost $1 million in impact fees to be able to do anything with it. And the homes in the neighborhood were like 400 grand. Like it just couldn't make sense. Now, but with that being said, if someone wanted to buy that land as hunting land and build a small house on one portion of it, so where they're only having to impact a little bit, totally different, just against our investment thesis.
Sure. And a much lower resale price for that user.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last example I'll use, I think we've driven the point home. There were 9 contiguous lots in Durango, Colorado. We got a lead on a few years ago, and it looked pretty solid. It was pretty substantial topography, though, but it's in the mountains. It's in Colorado. So we thought that might not be an issue. And long story short, we went through all the due diligence. We met with planning and zoning, and what we found was the cost to do the grading, to mitigate everything they wanted, to build a whole cul-de-sac because they wanted enough space for a fire truck to turn around, just didn't make sense. But I like this example because not too far away is Telluride, or even a little further north is Aspen. And those places are so expensive and so desirable and in demand that those lots absolutely would be bought and built on by somebody because the demand is so high there. And that's a really extreme example, but it really just drives home the point. So at the end of the day, how do you figure this out? Well, if you have Regrid or Land ID on one screen and Zillow on the other, and you're looking at a flood zone or wetlands, you can quickly see, okay, are any of the lots trading in the flood zone or wetland? That one's easy to figure out. And then when it comes to the perk test, the topography, that's more a matter of just talking to local experts, builders, realtors, and they can quickly clue you in on, okay, you need to do an engineered septic. Well, how much is it going to cost? Will builders eat that cost, or are there enough lots available with suitable for standard septic lots that it doesn't make sense? So local experts are a big part of this equation.
Yep. Do not be afraid to pay engineers for their time to figure it out with a specific lot you have, or just to consult with them to get all the information you need. Because you could look at that map that we just had up for Florida and be like, oh, this is killer. I found a bunch of vacant lots with nice homes all around. And now you know why they're not selling. And with that being said, there could be pockets like that in other states where there's a ton of land out there that people inherited or have had for a long time, that laws can change, regulations can change, all sorts of things that can change. But the only way you're going to have that insight is by building your local team of experts that really, really know land as an asset class.